August 31st, 1997. Um, for so many people, that date just brings back immediate, powerful memories.
Absolutely. It really does.
It's the day Princess Diana died, of course. And even now, what, over 25 years later, the uh, the circumstances of that night in Paris,
Yeah.
well, they're still intensely debated.
They really are. It hasn't faded.
So in this deep dive, we're not just going over the headlines you already know. Our aim is to really try and dissect what happened. Move from the official accounts to the questions that just won't go away.
Right. And we're looking at material that digs into those immediate events, the crash itself, but also the enduring mysteries that still kind of capture our attention.
What's so compelling, I think, is just its lasting grip on the public imagination.
Hmm.
It's more than just a historical tragedy, isn't it? It feels like a pivotal cultural moment.
Definitely. And as the material we've looked at shows, even things that might seem straightforward on the surface, they're still subject to a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah.
A lot.
Okay, so let's start with those final moments in Paris. The information we have, it paints this picture, right? Diana and Dodi fade, trying to escape. Just this intense paparazzi pursuit.
Yeah, a really aggressive pursuit, by all accounts.
And they end up getting into that Mercedes, driven by Henri Paul.
Who was the acting head of security at the Ritz, yeah.
Right. And the widely accepted account, the official story, is that the car then crashed in the Pont de l'Homme tunnel.
Yeah.
Tragic accident. Is that the end of the story?
Well, the material we reviewed suggests it's probably far more complex than that simple narrative. I mean, the crash itself, obviously, that's undeniable.
Sure.
But the circumstances leading up to it and what happened immediately after, that's where all the questions and the alternative interpretations really start cropping up.
And some of those questions, as
Yeah.
we dig into our sources, they're genuinely perplexing. Take Henri Paul's reported blood alcohol levels. That's a big one.
A huge one.
The information points to a very high reading.
Hmm.
But then there doesn't seem to be solid, conclusive evidence of the kind of, heavy drinking session that would typically lead to that result.
Exactly. And that's a key point of contention raised in the materials. Statistically, a blood alcohol level that high, without clear proof of him actually consuming that much alcohol,
Yeah.
it's unusual.
It is.
Which, inevitably leads people to speculate. Was the testing accurate? People even suggest the possibility of manipulation. This one detail really challenges the straightforward drunk driving accident explanation.
It really does. And then you look at the crash site itself right after it happened. The material we've seen mentions a surprisingly limited number of initial witnesses on the scene.
And a delay, apparently, in help arriving, which, for a major tunnel in the middle of Paris.
Right. It feels anomalous. It doesn't quite fit what you'd expect.
It paints a slightly odd picture, yeah.
Then you've got Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, the only survivor.
Who suffered terrible injuries, of course.
Terrible injuries. And the information available suggests his account. Well, it reportedly differed in some ways from the, let's call it, the official version of events.
Now, was that because of the severe trauma? Trauma obviously affects memory, sometimes profoundly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very real possibility.
Or do those discrepancies point to something else? The possibility of maybe a deliberate cover-up or concealment of information? It's uncomfortable to think about, but it's definitely been a recurring theme in the discussion around this.
And that really highlights the complexity of eyewitness testimony, doesn't it? Especially after extreme trauma.
It does. But these inconsistencies, the ones highlighted in our sources, they've undeniably fueled the rise of alternative theories trying to explain what happened that night.
And those alternative explanations, they go in quite a few different directions.
Yeah.
The material we looked at touches on several key areas of speculation.
Yeah, quite a range.
There's the theory involving the royal family somehow. The potential role of MI6, that's the British Foreign Intelligence Service, for anyone unfamiliar.
Like the CIA or Mossad, yeah.
And even the idea that the paparazzi, the ones chasing them, played a more direct, maybe even fatal role than just causing the driver to speed.
It's interesting how these theories often connect with existing public perceptions or, narratives already out there.
How so?
Well, take Mohammed Al-Fayed's accusation. It's referenced in our sources. He very publicly claimed the royal family was behind Diana's death because she was in a relationship with his son, Dodi.
Right, a very explosive
It's
claim.
hugely explosive, and it tapped right into that existing public fascination and, let's be honest, speculation about the inner workings of the monarchy, their feelings about Diana.
It certainly adds another very dramatic layer. So, okay, in an attempt to get some definitive answers, the British government launched a formal inquest, a big one.
Operation Paget. Leading into the inquest proper, yeah.
Yeah.
A massive investigation.
And the material we're looking at states that in 2008, that inquest finally concluded. The verdict: unlawful killing.
Right. Unlawful killing caused by the grossly negligent driving of both Henri Paul and the pursuing paparazzi vehicles. That was the official finding.
Officially, that's the conclusion. End of story.
Well, again, the information we have makes it pretty clear that conclusion wasn't universally accepted. Not by a long shot.
Still doubts.
A significant number of people felt and still feel that the inquest perhaps didn't uncover the complete truth, or maybe overlooked crucial bits of information.
It's worth remembering, too, an inquest is different from a criminal trial, right?
Exactly. Its purpose is different. It focuses on the cause of death, the how, when, where, rather than assigning criminal guilt in the way a court trial does. And that legal distinction might explain why the findings didn't fully satisfy everyone looking for, perhaps, more definitive blame or answers.
That's a really important point. And the sources we look at, they do highlight specific concerns, these sort of red flags that were raised during the inquest and afterwards. Seems like, well, missing video footage, for instance, CCTV from key areas, what some people described as unusual behavior or actions by the French authorities in the initial investigation phase.
Right. Questions about the initial handling of the scene and evidence.
Exactly. And even allegations about key evidence potentially disappearing or being misplaced. These are the kinds of details that just keep fueling those alternative theories. They prevent a sense of real closure for a lot of people.
Connecting this back to the public, the lack of this universally accepted, definitive explanation, combined with all these lingering questions, it just poured fuel on the media fire, didn't it?
Oh, the global reaction was just overwhelming. The sources remind us of the sheer scale of that public grief. That funeral, watched by billions, it was a global event like few others.
Absolutely. A profound global impact. And the media coverage that followed, Relentless doesn't even begin to cover it. It was driven by this huge public hunger for answers, for explanations, for anything.
Yeah. And our sources show that coverage was all over the place, wasn't it? From, the really sensational tabloid stuff
Definitely some of that.
to more serious, in-depth documentaries and ongoing investigations that continue even now in some forms.
This constant flood of information, some accurate, some less so, probably further complicated how the public understood or tried to understand what actually happened.
It's a story that has just refused to fade from public consciousness. But, looking beyond the immediate tragedy, the circumstances of her death, the material we've explored rightly pushes us to think about Diana's wider legacy.
Yes, absolutely. She was so much more than just the subject of this event.
The information really emphasizes her role as a mother, obviously, but also as this global icon and her humanitarian work, which was genuinely impactful.
That's where her enduring influence really lies, I think. And it makes you ask some pretty big questions about the ripples from her death, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, how did her passing fundamentally change the royal family? Did it force them to adapt, to modernize in ways they wouldn't have otherwise?
That's a huge question. And what might have happened if she'd lived? What different paths might her life have taken? And maybe even the monarchy itself.
How did the tragedy shape how people viewed the monarchy in the years after? Did it damage them? Did it ultimately lead to changes that strengthened them? It's fascinating to consider.
And ultimately, as the material we've looked at suggests, despite the inquest's official conclusions, Princess Diana remains this incredibly powerful, enduring figure in public memory.
Yeah.
And the question of whether we really know the full story of her death, well, it clearly continues to be debated and speculated about.
So just to wrap up this deep dive, we've touched on the official account of that night in Paris. The inconsistencies and the unanswered questions that popped up almost immediately. We've looked at the various alternative theories that gained traction, some quite wild, others perhaps more plausible.
We covered the findings of the British government's inquest, that verdict of unlawful killing.
Right, and the massive global reaction, the media frenzy, and importantly, the lasting and significant legacy of Diana herself beyond the tragedy.
Which leads us to a final thought, really, for you listening. When you consider all these different angles, the official story, the doubts, the theories, the unanswered questions, what aspects of this whole event do you find most significant? Or perhaps most unresolved?
Yeah, what for you is the most compelling or maybe the most puzzling piece of this? And why do you think this particular tragedy continues to hold such a powerful place in our collective memory, even after all this time?